Welcome, everyone. Super excited to be talking to Nyasha today. Nyasha is founder of Billy, an InsurTech platform in the construction management space. Nyasha, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me on your show, Rashad. I really appreciate it. My name is Nyasha. I was born in Zimbabwe, and the name means grace. I came gracefully to New York on a scholarship and went to school at Fordham University, worked for a construction company. My first job was actually laborer, working at the old Yankee Stadium, and I used to literally use a sledgehammer to break apart concrete so we could separate the old seats that are now also part of the new stadium as a means to cut construction costs. And I did this work for a company called Plaza Construction, where I ended up working in the mailroom. And if you know anything about construction, mailrooms are where drawings used to be printed. So I would work with gloves and still have paper cuts every day. And somehow I ended up working at Procore Technologies, which is construction project management software that's widely used by general contractors. And I worked there as a product manager. And this is where I perfected my craft of building financial software for construction and real estate.
That's awesome. Thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, you have really super interesting story, and when we met, you talked about it a bit. So how did that go about? Like, when you hear Zimbabwe in the Western media, everyone like forms this kind of idea in their mind, right? Like, hyperinflation, and everything. How was it growing up in Zimbabwe, and what was the journey, going from Zimbabwe to, I guess, from New York, and now, pursuing a multi-million-dollar startup entrepreneurship. I just think it's a really super interesting journey and story. So tell us a little bit about your background growing up in Zimbabwe, and then your journey overall.
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct to say that people have different ideas when they think of Zimbabwe. Most people know Bob Marley's song Zimbabwe, so that's always like, hey, you come from Zimbabwe, like Bob Marley. Or they think of Victoria Falls, or they think of, our former president, Robert Mugabe, who liberated us from British rule. So Zimbabwe is a British colony, hence why I can speak and understand English pretty well. I grew up in a normal family, so I'm, one of four, the only son and the oldest one. My parents are, not of wealthy means, so they sacrificed a lot for us to go to school. And I was mostly sent to boarding schools where I lived with many other boys. So I wasn't that gifted in many sports, but the one thing I could do really well was run and hit a tennis ball pretty well. So somehow I ended up at a school called Prince Edward, which is an all boys school. And at this school, they have international kids who come and go to this school as well. One of the things I just wasn't doing so well in was English. And they had an idea, which was, well, you can have this enrichment program where you write a letter to somebody in the United States. And that letter, incidentally, is what changed my whole life. And so the way this happened was we were at something that's called assembly, and assembly is once a week where everybody's brought to one place, which was the big gymnasium that we had, and they would make announcements about everything that's going on around school. So I remember this because the previous week I'd had one of those incidents where you get up really quick and you try to stretch and then you pass out. at assembly, and I was acutely aware of just where I was and tried to really listen to everything that was going on. So the headmaster says, does anybody want to write a letter to somebody in the United States? And imagine 600 boys laughing at that. And I was like, actually, let me give it a shot. And so after assembly, I went to what they call the teacher's room. It's more like where the teachers go and hang out before they come to class. And I went and asked, like, hey, what are the details to write to that pen pal? And this lady gave me the address and the initial letter, and it was to this guy called Michael Tyler Fisher. Michael belonged to a family out here called the Fisher family. They run a real estate company called Fisher Brothers, which also controls plaza construction. But I didn't know at that time. So all I knew was I need to write a letter and I need to show it to my English teacher that I'm doing this so I can get credit. So the first problem was, well, how do I mail this thing? Because it's, you have to put postage on there, and we lived in a very, like hyperinflationary country. It wasn't as bad as it became in 2008, but still, even coming up with $5-6 to mail something was quite a lot. So it took almost my entire monthly allowance that I got from my parents to send that one letter. And in that one letter, I kind of wrote that, hey, like, if you do get this letter, can you kind of like mail me back like $5? So, and he did. I'll never forget that, because I was like, wow, like, what a guy. Now I can go trade this $5 that came in the mail, for more than my monthly allowance, and I have a bit more to write back to him. And so that's how it started. And that's the letter and opportunity that changed my life and also my entire family.
That's amazing. It's just amazing to me, right? That one thing that had pretty much changes trajectory of someone's life. So amazing. Thanks for sharing that. So tell us about where you are today. So you founded Billy. Where along the journey are you with Billy?
Yeah, so I founded Billy last year in February, and it was primarily to solve pains around insurance for construction business owners and construction companies that are just trying to prove who has insurance and who doesn't. We're a seed stage company, so we closed a seed round last summer. So it's $3.5 million that we did, and it was funded with companies like Metaprop, Coleus Capital, Shadow Ventures, Village Global, Household Fund, to name a few of the VCs that helped us out. In terms of customers, we do count 4 of the top 400 contractors in the country as customers of Billy. We've got over 11,000 subcontractors, so there's a little companies that are managing their insurance on Billy. And on Billy, we also operate our own insurance agency. So we essentially are using data from the app to power the insurance agency, which is licensed in all 50 states. And there in the insurance agency, we count just over 50 companies as insurance customers. So still early on during our journey, but we're just trying to ask questions about how insurance is done, because it still seems as if it hasn't changed ever since it was introduced in the 1800s.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think that's most insurance in general. So I have to ask, Billy is I guess, InsurTech firm. A lot of the founders, and I know a lot of founders that I speak to, they're usually, going with whatever the current trend is. I guess like last 2 years, Web3 crypto was big. Prior to that, that AI was a big trend theme that a lot of founders were chasing. You're a relatively young guy. We don't see a lot of young people in InsurTech. A lot of the time it's like experienced executive. They're trying to do something different. It does happen, but not as common. I guess what made you pursue InsurTech as a vertical? Was that based on your experience, or you saw an opportunity and need? Like, what made you decide to go into InsurTech?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I was actually trying to build a payments company, hence the name Billy. The original name was Billy Pay. And what my partner and myself set out to do was based on our experience at Procore. So we'd seen that construction companies still pay each other with a check. And we just wanted to, make it a lot simpler and charge a fee for it. But what we ended up realizing was if you use a payment facilitator like Stripe or Adyen, it's actually a lot slower to move large amounts of money through those payment facilitators. And the best way to do it would be something known as direct transmission, where essentially you're acting as the bank from your own bank account, and you can rent that facility from your own bank, but they'll limit the amount of money that you can move because, for example, if somebody like a cyber attacker gets in the middle and changes the bank account and you move 400,000 because you did direct transmission, that money is gone. You can't just like pull it back. And so that was the death of the first idea of building a payment business. But what we kept hearing was, well, anytime you try to pay somebody in construction, we have to check for compliance. And we check for two things. Do they have a lien waiver? And do they also have insurance? So the lien waiver side, we already knew that there were great companies that were solving for that. But on the insurance side, we decided to jump a bit deeper into it. Part of it was just my product management experience of just asking the 5 whys. And one of the things I realized is, there's a lot of friction in trying to figure out who has insurance, but there's an even bigger problem in buying insurance, right? So when people hear the word insurance, some people think that businesses just have to buy one insurance policy, but they actually have to buy a suite of policies. So even if you're a startup in software, you have to buy general liability, workers' comp for your workers, cyber insurance. If you took VC money, you need directors and officers insurance. So to get educated on those types of products, you need a broker. It's not something that you can just digitize. And I think maybe that's something that I also learned as a product manager, which is not everything needs to be completely digitized. And insurance is just one of those things, like where brokerages, for example, you don't need to build a whole new app, but you could power that service with software and become much, much more efficient. So hence why we decided to form the brokerage on top of the workflow tool that we have, because it's an already proven business and we can add a lot more value with just a little bit of technology.
That's great. Thanks for that background. Super helpful. So now that you've been in the InsurTech space for some time, like what's your view on it, right? Like I look at InsurTech. I think compared to fintech, we're still kind of InsurTech 1.0. Sure, there's been some early successes and whatnot. What's your overall view on InsurTech as a sector? I mean, it's a multi-trillion-dollar asset class. A lot of big market, right? Different segments within a big market. Like, what's your overall view on InsurTech as a sector?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most attractive sectors to enter in if you want to, start a technology company. The reason why I say this is everybody needs insurance, but the way in which you purchase or manage insurance is still horse and buggy. Horse and buggy meaning you are still relying from Jake from State Farm. You're still storing your insurance documents in Gmail, or like my parents, it's under my mom's dresser, right? So many opportunities to disrupt, purchasing and managing. Then there's even, well, when you need to use insurance for claims, right? So I own a home, and once a year, there's always some kind of weather-related event that damages property or damages the house itself. But every time I go through a claim, I get a physical check in the mail. I still have to fill out physical pieces of paper just to get the claim in, so there you go. That's another, idea of things that people can do to, streamline insurance. And then there's the insurance products themselves. You're starting to see many flavors of, what we call MGAs or MGUs. So companies like Lemonade, the Metro Miles, Hippo Insurance, those are MGAs and MGUs. So the ability to, have certain products that are meant for certain people, I think is also like another great opportunity that's out there. And I think that their insurance industry in terms of technology is still first innings, right? So think of this as if you're in 2002 of fintech, where the big players are still, starting, and there's still so much more room to grow within the US and even globally as well.
Yeah, that's great insight. It just boggles my mind, like how much paperwork is involved in insurance still, right? Like here we are, 2022. A lot of our expectations have changed with like buying things with one click through Amazon and things like that. Yet, like you said, like claim, even actually getting insurance, it's like, Tom from, State Farm or whatever, coming in, filling a form a lot of the time. And same thing with the claims. It's very paper-based, very manual. You don't know where along the process, like, your claim is, gets into, I guess, that dark hole, and you kind of wait for it to kind of come back to you. So yeah, great point. And I'm still surprised that some of the largest players have not caught up to the consumer expectation.
Yeah, and just to plug onto that, I think maybe something the audience can relate to is if you've ever traveled and you have one of those credit cards like Sapphire or American Express, and something happens, your luggage gets lost, or you just want to file a claim against that. I bet you members of the audience who've done this can understand just how painful the claim process is. Not as simple as just clicking a button. Your credit card company will send you actual PDF forms that they want you to fill out. And those PDF forms are not even fillable on your computer. So now you have to go find a printer. And if you're a millennial like me, I don't have a printer. And even the WeWork I'm in, got rid of printers. So now it's like, I got to go to Kinko's and pay $2 a page to just print out like forms and then put them in the mail and mail them to, whichever carrier is trying to process things for you.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder if they do that intentionally. So like you don't actually file the claim, right? You just give up, like say, you know what, this is.
Yeah.
But I think what happens is like you think about, you know what, maybe I'm not gonna like buy this insurance next time, right? Because they're making it so difficult. Maybe they don't understand that part of it. Okay, great, awesome. So this has been super interesting. Thank you for sharing your journey, your story, and also where along the journey you are with Billy. So a lot of my audience are like some of them are professionals, execs like me. Others are just starting their career. If you had some advice based on your life, your background, your accomplishment, for the audience, what would it be?
Yeah, I get asked this questions a lot of times, but it's in the flavor of what would you advise the younger self, and it's just come down to two things, which is A, be patient with yourself. A lot of the things that you want to happen take longer than you think they will happen. In my case, it's like multiply the timeline you have times 5 is how long, typically things will also take to accomplish. And then the next part is in becoming a founder, people always talk about the day the company started, right? Everything is rosy, and the day you exit, you either have an IPO, somebody buys your company, and nobody really talks about the stuff that happens in the middle. That's the really hard stuff that you have to anticipate, right, and prepare for, and have the most positive mindset. And when those really tough things start to happen, I think it's important for a founder to know that you will always have many scenarios playing in your head. I'm not good enough. My product's not good enough. I just need to build more features. And the answer to that is A, patience, and also B, most of the things you worry about will never happen. So those will be my two pieces of advice, which is be patient with yourself, and the things you worry about most likely would never happen as well.
It's great advice. So thank you, Nyasha, for joining us. This has been a great conversation, and look forward to seeing you in person soon in New York.
Awesome. Thank you so much again.
All right.